We need to hear these hard truths.
Enslavement, rape, torture, working to death.
We've convinced ourselves that we are the only nation in the whole of history who's only ever done good.
My opinion is based on reading and learning all of these facts, and that's not right.
The legacies of the past have shaped our society.
For more than a century, Britain was this chief slave trading nation in the Atlantic world.
British ships traded about 3.25 million people across the Atlantic Ocean.
So what happened to those people? Enslavement, rape, torture, working to death.
It's hard to imagine the empire's economy without slavery, without the slave trade. And it's not just because the slave trade was particularly profitable, it's that it provided the labor in the Americas that made everything else possible.
It's a period where sugar, for instance, goes from being a luxury to being something that everybody was using every day. Cotton, which was grown by enslaved people, was fundamental to the Industrial Revolution in Britain. So it's absolutely transformative for Britain. Britain legislated to end the slave trade in 1807, and that came into force in 1808, but didn't outlaw slavery itself in its own colonies until 1833, and that act didn't really fully go into force until 1838.
We're heralded with these ideas that Wilberforce rolled into Parliament and fought, and there are a lot more incidents before that led to that act. And they were led by people of colour. And we look at people like Equiano, then you'll realise that it wasn't just one person saving people.
It came to an end in a process that led to a lot of British self-congratulation, and very rapidly a story was created that emphasised British abolition and not British responsibility.
We use history to make ourselves feel good about ourselves. History is a place we go for recreation, not to ask difficult questions. And what that means is if history is a place of comfort, you need to remove from it all of the facts, all of the episodes that are uncomfortable, that are discomforting.
The curriculum tends to focus only on quite narrow parts of this history. So I think a lot of children in our schools are learning about the trade in enslaved people, the Atlantic slave trade, but they tend not to learn about slavery itself, and certainly not slavery in the British colonies.
When I lived in England, I was a graduate student in England, you could not get a room full of people together to talk about these subjects. It was just not something that was taught even, at the university level on a very regular basis.
My opinion is based on reading and learning all of these facts, which came after my formal education. And that's not right.
The legacies of the past have shaped our societies, and discrimination is present in all industries, all societies.
History performs a different and I think very worrying function in Britain compared to other countries. We don't use our history to ask questions about how our nation came to be what it is. And that means the history of empire, it means the history of the Atlantic slave trade, it means the history of the horrific violence that undercut empire. All of that gets in the way of history being a place of comfort.
If we're always told that white history is history and the narratives are told from white perspectives, then we don't really appreciate what actually happened.
We need to hear these hard truths. We've convinced ourselves that we are the only nation in the whole of history who's only ever done good. And we honestly believe that. And people get hurt when you suggest Britain, like every other country ever, has done some good things and some bad things. We've come to believe in a fairy tale, and we call it history.